Good day, everyone. We are sitting here in our staff training, and Kaylee had this excellent idea. She said, why don't we just do a Facebook Live? This is such great information that we're sharing right now. Why don't we just televise this to the world? Maddie, don't worry, the camera's on me. We didn't see you fumble and drop all the markers. But anyway, what we're talking about is some functional movement basic training. I like how that sounds. It sounds like very militant. Functional movement basic training, and we're talking about systems, and we're talking about the belt system, how to prioritize stuff, programming. It's been a really cool, eye-opening training, I think, for all of us, even me. You learn something better by teaching it and saying it out loud. But anyway, we got Devi on here, Kaylee, Maddie, Brandy, our office manager, and myself, and we're all sitting here in the FM area right before we start our afternoon shift. And we're just that dedicated that we're just doing a training like kind of over our lunch break. We took a quick lunch break so we could train. So real quick, shameless plug before we start, if you haven't read our book yet, grab it for free. It's called Move All Secrets, and you can grab it at book.movenowyou.com. You can get it for free. You just cover shipping. We'll send it out to you. It talks about this belt system thing we're talking about. So I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to talk through this. And if you are not super familiar with the belt system, I'm not going to go through the basics right now. So you're just going to have to pick up where we're going and jump in and see if you can hang, okay? So we're zooming in. We got Maddie over here, and I'm zooming in, and she's writing stuff out. So the cool thing is this is our board. This is our board all prepped out, and it's all HIPAA compliant because guess what? Just first names, so we're not violating anyone's privacy here. But this is how we roll, is we have all these first names, and we have all the exercises mapped out for this afternoon for these patients that are going to come in and do their corrective exercise and functional rehab stuff in our clinic. So what Maddie's mapping out here is I'm talking about of the 8 dysfunctions we have. And so just a quick little caveat, this is gonna be good training for our Move All doctors who are already part of the program and understand how this works. For those of you who are not, just try to hang in there. It might be a little confusing. But there's 8 different dysfunctions. What are those dysfunctions again? We didn't go through all of them, but let's see if we can do it by memory. Devion got 4 of them. What's D1?
Cervical.
And then D2?
Thoracic. D3 is shoulder, and D4 is scapula.
Cool. D5 is core. D6, D7, and squat. So that's D1 through D8. Perfect. Very nice. So now what do we got over here? We were asking of those 8 dysfunctions, which one would you categorize under a mobility issue and which one under stability? And I asked Devion, I said, how many are there of each? And he thought about it for a second. He's like 6 and 2. And I said, Devion, you're a genius. So mobility, there's 6 of them. Stability, there's 2 of them. So let's talk about which is which. D1, what is it? Cervical mobility, it says it in the title. Is that mobility or stability? Mobility. So let's write that on, just put D1 cervical. D1-cervical. All right, then let's look at D2. D2 is thoracic mobility. Is that mobility or stability? It's mobility, says it in the title. So D2, thoracic. Okay, and then we got D3. What's D3? Shoulder mobility. Is that mobility or stability? It's mobility. This is very easy to figure out because it's in the title of everything. Is there a graphic you have real quick, Maddie, where you can just pull up the belt system so I can just show it on camera real quick so people know what the heck I'm referring to?
Journal?
Yeah, it's in the journal. Yeah.
It's first form.
All right, so this is our journal that all of our patients get. I can't zoom out. Come on, Facebook. There we go. Okay, so D1, D2, D3, and then we have D4 is scapular dysfunction. Oh, I guess it doesn't say cervical mobility, it says dysfunction. Yeah. So technically I was giving it away. And then D5 is core, D6 posterior chain, D7 is hip, and then D8 is squat. This is the secret sauce to Move All University, is we built out how to prioritize exercises based on dysfunctional patterns. We're trying to make functional movement easy, okay? Which doesn't have to be all that complicated. So now we have, let's go to this. D4 is scapular dysfunction. Is that mobility or stability, Devion?
Stability.
Very good. Scapular is stability. So let's write that in the red. D4. All right. Cool. D5 is what? Core.
Stability.
Yes. You all missed it here too. Kaylee was just eating a jelly donut. I wish we would have had Facebook
That's
Live
pretty
rolling
great.
for that. Okay. That's one of her fun facts about Kaylee. She's never been on an airplane and she eats jelly donuts every day. Okay. Anyway. All right, D6 is posterior chain. That's going to be mobility. Can't bend over and touch your toes. Usually have, and it's interesting because the posterior chain one is kind of a fun one because it's mobility, it's activation, and stability. It's kind of both. So actually, D6, we should call that both. Man.
Oh man.
So I mean, this is changing the whole model right now. Just talking this through.
That's 3 now.
Yeah. So what I would do actually, just so it's not even right here, I would just
Okay.
see nicely. I would just like write D6 and write whoa. You just do that. Just write whoa. Okay. So D6 posterior chain, because that's also it's a problem where you have posterior chain stiffness, but you also have posterior chain stiffness because it's a protective mechanism because the person is posteriorly translated like this and they're just hanging on their joints and their posterior chain is locked down trying to protect them from failing further into that posterior translation. But the posterior chain, so it can be tight but elongated, it needs to be activated. And it can also be a mobility issue where it's tight, needs to be toned down, and in certain cases lengthened. So anyway, we'll just call it both for now. D7 is hip dysfunction. Hip is almost always, it's a mobility issue. It's usually an area that is hypomobile that needs mobility. So D7 is hip. You're doing so good, Maddie.
Had to mess up at some point.
That's okay. You're doing awesome. And then D8. D8's an interesting one too. All the protocols we have for D8, a lot of them are mobility. However, a squat sometimes is just a big time motor control issue and it can be a stability issue. Like perfect example, Kaylee over here who squats. When she does a squat, her tibio-dorsal angle is very off, but she front squats, cleans it up. It's more of a balancing mechanism, more of like a little bit of balance, stability, motor control. Not a mobility issue though. She doesn't have any mobility issue restricting her squat. Maybe your feet a little bit because you have foot pronation.
A little bit.
And so you do have like tight lateral gastroc and bicep femoris and probably tight TFL. Okay. So anyway, back to this. So D8 squat. I'd write another little thing right here. I'd write it like
Double whoa.
Yeah. So Devion, this is interesting because at first you actually guessed 4 and 4, and I was like and then you're like 6 and 2. But look at that. You're kind of right in both. You're kind of right both times.
Both times.
So you're right in both ways. It's kind of 6 of them are mobility, 2 are stability, and there's a 4 and 4. Okay, interesting. So we'll definitely get some pictures of this because this is a good future training for all of our removal doctors. Hopefully you guys are watching this right now, and gals. Okay, so next thing, if that's our prioritization, we know there's a rule that you always want to do mobility before stability. So let's just take a sample patient real quick. Let's say we have John Doe. Let's say John Doe, if you can just write below it in like black or something. Let's write John Doe, John D. And I'm gonna prescribe his dysfunction based on what we just went through on his Move Well 3. We flagged a bunch of dysfunctions. We're programming his exercise. Let's say John D is D1, D2, D3, and let's say D6, D7, D5. Not an uncommon prescription. Okay, let's say John D has low back pain. So he's coming back to do some functional movement stuff. What is one of the things we don't want John D to say? I've been coming here 5 times and you haven't shown me anything for me to relieve my low back pain, right? So that's not an uncommon thing that would happen if we didn't understand one of the caveats to how we prioritize D1 through D8. Because normally how you would program this, if you just did it in order, is you would do what? Is you would go like this. If you can just draw in blue real quick, I'll show you the order in which you would do that. And let's talk this out real quick. D1, is it mobility, stability? It's mobility, right? So you do D1 first. It's at the beginning. It goes in sequential order from 1 to 8 is one way of thinking about it. But then you organize them from mobility to stability. So I guess a little caveat first before we even get into this part, sorry. well, no, you know, I'll keep going through this so that we can draw a conclusion this way. So D1 would be first, and then D2 would be second, D3 would be third, D7 would be fourth, D8, and then D6.
You didn't say D8.
What was that?
You said D6, D7, D5.
Oh, sorry. So sorry, okay.
I think you probably already put it in order.
Gotcha. So D1, D2, D3, and then D7, sorry, D6, D7, D5.
So yeah, like you said.
Yeah, so D6, D7, D5. Oh, I did put it in that order.
Yeah, I was like, you're jumping
Darn.
ahead.
I did put it in that order. Okay, so we just wrote the same thing twice. Okay, anyway, for everyone that's watching this, the reason I went through this grueling little process right now is because that's organizing it. So like underline all of those D's that are mobility. Cool, and then the only one that's stability is D5 in that case. But now here's the problem, here's the caveat with this guy. He has low back pain. So he's gonna want some protocols for low back. Protocols for low back is we're gonna think low back, we're gonna think hip, we're gonna think posterior chain. Now, the hip and posterior chain is D6 and 7. Is it possible he even does this stuff? Is he too acute to do it? What's gonna help him? Is there some piriformis issue that needs to be like toned down a little bit that he's gonna think is the best thing since sliced bread because it's gonna help his low back while he gets out of the acute phase? If that's the case, and if the doctor conveys that over to the exercise team, then the way you're gonna wanna program this is you're gonna wanna explain to the patient, hey, there's a whole sequence of stuff we're gonna do with you, but because your low back hurts right now and that's your primary thing, we're actually going to jump into that a little bit in the beginning, but then we're going to simultaneously start over and fix you in order of neck, like kind of from the top down. So beat them to the punch. So they're not saying, hey, I have low back pain. How come you're working on my neck? My neck doesn't hurt. And so these are things that we relay to them, but we're not really explaining usually in detail of like, here's why we're programming your exercise this way. So sometimes it's the exercise staff that's the first people to explain this on like a day 4, day 5. Okay. So here's what I would do with this guy is I would do D6, because can you open the journal real quick to D6? And I'll just show you like what protocols would be the obvious ones on D6. It's primarily the mobility stuff, the global and the focused mobility that usually helps desensitize pain. So we're at D6. So we'd have foam roll, piriformis, foam roll calf. Okay, and then this is the case where depending on what the person has, we as the doctor would write on our exercise prescription card what things to prioritize. So we could put like a little primary next to it. Like maybe what we do is like a way to communicate is we write acute. So we put like, or actually, you know what, on our, yeah, and that's something too. Yeah, it does have the acute thing, where it's got acute and then non-acute.
Mm-hmm.
The little caveat we'd want to put there, I think we need a little bit more space to write some things in next to it. If we could, Kaylee, in our next revision of this, can we decrease the font on this, squish this down, and leave like a little more space? So have that line right there smaller, or maybe just something we circle, and then a line about twice, maybe even triple the length next to each one where we can write in protocols if we had to. You know what I'm saying? Because then what we could do very easily, this is like super behind the scenes training that you're seeing here. You're seeing protocols being built right before your eyes. Because then what we can do here is we could write very easily in the acute stage, we want to work at D6, but we're not going to be working on their calves at that time. We're going to be working on like foam roll piriformis, double lacrosse ball piriformis, and then maybe like a piriformis stretch if that's what the doctor determines that we want to start with this person on to decrease pain and tone down pain, while we can then next visit or very soon thereafter start D1, D2, D3 and start working their dysfunction from the top down. Does that make sense? Okay. All right.
I forgot the last one you said, so I just.
Piriformis, that's fine.
Yes,
That's fine.
what you said.
Okay, so now the last little summary of this prioritization training that we're doing here. Hopefully this is making some sense that it gives you some standards to follow, And there's going to be a bunch of different scenarios that you can work through and figure out what they are based on these rules. So we don't have to sit here and figure out every single rule. You just have to, or every single scenario, you just have to know the rules and then you can apply it. It's kind of like the teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime thing. That's what we're trying to do, is feed man and women for a lifetime. So then the question is this: what is the normal D1 through D8 prioritization, assuming the person is not acute? If you're looking at mobility and stability, it would go like what? D1, 2, 3. You'd skip 4 because that's scapular. So you go D1, 2, 3, and then you would go 6, 7, 8, 4, 5. Does that make sense? Because you're working all the mobility stuff first and then you're doing the stability stuff after. Because the pure stability patterns that we're talking about are these two, D4 and 5, scapular and core.
Mm-hmm.
These have a little bit of crossover. That's why I wrote whoa next to it. So can you just write that like underneath in another color again? And just write like normal order, non-acute. Normal order, non-acute. This is programming stuff. I know this is like in the future, but it helps make a little bit of sense because sometimes if you see certain protocols on here, like leg lowering drill, shoulder press, get up, deadlift, like knowing, okay, so this person had to have cleared all this stuff prior, just making sure that we're not putting the cart before the horse. Like, we don't want to show someone, for example, or even start them on a get up if they don't have good shoulder mobility. We don't want to start them on a get up if they have a hip immobility issue all the way up at D7, but we haven't touched it yet. Okay, because that's jumping the gun too much. They need to learn those white belt protocols first before we ever creep into like a yellow belt protocol. And technically, the person has to test out of white belt before they can even show a yellow belt protocol. So we should never show a yellow belt protocol until a person is at least a yellow belt showing up on the board. Right? Does that make sense, everyone? Because I think that happened. Remember that the other day?
Yesterday?
Yeah. Was it yesterday?
I was asking you about progressing someone, and you're like, no, he hasn't done these particular white belts.
But it's a fair question because you have patients looking around seeing other people get to do like a get up or something. They're like, I want to learn that. You're like, you haven't learned all your stuff yet. Well, I'm good. I can do it. Yeah.
And he did the precursor for the get up so well that you're like, why don't we just have him do the get up?
Right. And sometimes you think that, but then you'll find dysfunctions in the white belt stuff, and you're like, I'm glad I went through that. So normal, non-acute, or which like as a side note, as a caveat real quick, that system that we're following is really the reason why people go and start an exercise routine, like in a gym, and then they hurt themselves. Because they're like, I can do this exercise, it visually looks okay, it feels okay, but what are they lacking that you don't see that's then gonna cause an injury? And the stuff you're lacking that you don't see is you didn't break down all their dysfunctions, throw some protocols at them, see if they could do those protocols, build a foundation, and then get back to that main movement. And that's a common thing that happens like in the personal training world, just because there's not enough tools to like dissect someone out and figure it out. But this system does it like more times than not. You know, there's always gonna be those people that slip through, but for the most part, someone should not be doing a kettlebell swing on day one. And that's like every group training class in the history of time that has a kettlebell is like, cool, you never seen a kettlebell before in your life? We're doing kettlebell swings today. Versus like in our programming, kettlebell swings don't come until you've done all the other kettlebell movements first. We hold the swing in a high reverence because it's a ballistic movement. There's a lot of opportunity to hurt yourself. You know, you're swinging a kettlebell. You need to know how to hip hinge. You need to stabilize your core. You need to learn all this other stuff first before you throw them into because that's something you were telling me, Brandon. Like you went into a group fitness class. They're like, cool, we're doing kettlebell swings.
They're like, oh, you don't know how to do the swing? Just hold it like this and do that.
Yeah. Just do it like this and hopefully you don't break your spine. Okay, cool. And then people say, I hate kettlebells, it hurt my low back, which I hear all the time. Which, that's not the case. As I B-roll footage of kettlebells. Okay. All right, anyway. So normal, non-acute order. What was that order again, Kaylee? Do you remember?
Just trying to.
The normal, non-acute order. It just goes D1, D2, D3. then as we're getting in D4 stability. So nope, let's skip that. D5 stability. Nope, skip that. And then go D6, D7, D8. And then we're going to come back around, and it's like, do you do core first or scapular first? You could kind of argue both ways, but for the sake of fun, let's just say you want a stable core before you do scapula. So I'll reverse my last statement. We'll do D5 and then D4. Okay. Cool. All right. So this is the basic training of prioritizing the belt system. Learn it, love it. Awesome. All right, I'm going to stop this for training. So hopefully this is not super confusing. This is meant for our move-all doctors who are already using this system to clear some things up for their exercise staff, their therapists. If you have questions about this, you can reach out to us. Grab the book at book.movenowu.com. You can also go into a masterclass. We did a 90-minute masterclass, and there's a link on that on our website, which is movenowu.com. You can watch the masterclass. I believe it's on there, but I'm giving a lot of URLs right now. It's movealluniversity.com/masterclass. Right. Anyway, with that said, over and out. We got to get back to training, finish seeing patients. Have a great 4th, everyone. Great day. I'll probably see you again before the 4th and on the 4th. But anyway, bye.